Hi guys, it's me Lore, and today I bring you an easy tutorial on how to add more spark to your paintings by adding colorful splashes to the backgrounds. I'll also show you how to create subtle color backgrounds so your painting gets more depth and becomes more interesting to the eye. I'd say that half of my paintings are usually a very detailed animal on a white paper. You'll see just a single element in my paintings, and that's because that's where I'm focusing on. But there's a reason behind that. Most of the times I paint having in mind that I might use it to make prints, posters or stickers, so I don't really need an extra background. In that case, if you want to focus on the subject alone, that's totally okay. I mean, if you're painting them to make a poster afterwards, like I do, then that's the way to do it, making sure that you have a clear edge of the subject you painted so you can scan and edit more easier and have a cleaner and nicer element to use on a poster composition or as a sticker, for example. But if your goal is purely to make a nice painting by itself, you might want to introduce some kind of background or any other element that can contrast with the main subject in your painting. It will become a much more interesting piece. So, if you want to learn a few easy tricks on how to do this, stay with me. One of the easiest ways to add some of that magic to your paintings is through watercolor splashes. I'm sure that you have seen some of my paintings that have these splashes. They are very easy to do and they look so cool in the finished painting. I usually make them towards the end of the painting so I can control a little bit more where to place them and how they will look with the main subject. But if you like to be a bit more experimental with your paintings, you can always add this at the very beginning of your painting and then just paint your subject on top of the random splashes. Remember that the best way is to try the different methods and see what works best for you and what you like more. So I'm going to show you how I actually make the splashes. Get a medium round brush that can hold a lot of water and dip it completely in the clean water cup. Then dip it in the watercolor paint and mix it on the palette until you have the desired color. Make sure to add more water if you need it, because we are making a puddle of colored water that we will use for the splashes. Try to always use some color that already exists in my painting and maybe a complementary color as well, so that we have that contrast. If you are scared of the splashes, I recommend you to start with a very diluted color, so in case you don't like it, you can quickly erase them with a paper towel. Or you can practice your splashes on a blank paper before adding them to your final piece. Once you have the brush ready and soaking wet, hold the finger of your other hand beneath the brush and tap on top. You'll see that if your brush has plenty of water, your splashes will be bigger. And if there is very little water left on your brush bristles, the splashes will look more like tiny dots. Also, you can cover some parts of your painting with another piece of paper if you don't want the splashes in certain parts of your painting. Also, depending on how you hold the brush, you will get the splashes in different directions and with different effects. You can drop the splashes vertically or horizontally or throw the splashes in diagonal. That's why it's a good idea to experiment until you learn how to kind of control the random splashes. Also, play with the intensity of color. You don't want all the splashes or dots to look exactly the same. So pick up a bit more color to make some dots darker and more vivid, and some bigger and some smaller. In some dots you can also use a paper towel to absorb some of the color so it looks lighter. As well as you can carefully add more color to existing splashes with a round pointy brush, just touching on top of the wet dots with more pigment to make them darker. Another way to make your paintings more interesting is by adding an abstract background. You can do this either at the beginning of your painting or at the end. Just plan around it. I'm going to show you how to do it before starting to paint the main subject. For me, it's easier to have the line drawing done first, so you can carefully wet the paper with clean water, just bordering the subject you are painting. So when you apply the watercolor, it will only stain on the wet paper. This is the wet on wet technique. We want the colors to merge into each other and blend nicely, so try to avoid hard edges or very hard shapes. Use a big brush for this technique, and depending on the traces that you want to make, use a round or a flat brush. This time, you can control a little bit more where you want the watercolor to go. Feel free to move the brush around and get nice abstract shapes, or you can even get nice patterns if you are using a flat brush. Choose the colors of your background wisely so it makes the subject pop out. You can play with the shapes in the background and even insinuate floral or botanical elements. And you can even mix in some dots and splashes like we did before. Be creative and experiment. And remember to have in mind the complementary colors and the colors of your main subject. If I'm combining the abstract background with some splashes, I'll most probably go with a lighter background and darker dot splashes, as you can see in these examples. I painted some botanical elements in the background using this technique, so it's not 100% abstract, but because the shapes are subtle, they look nice in contrast with the detailed subject. So if you want, you can add in tiny detail elements to the background too. But make sure you don't overdo it so you don't lose focus. To do this, I will suggest that you use a fine detail brush, and I will let it blend in some parts where the paper is still wet so you have a nice transition. Now, 2 techniques on how to add more interesting backgrounds to your paintings. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I hope you enjoy experimenting with your backgrounds. Remember to try different brushes and shapes and maybe try to add tiny details and play around with the splashes. Thank you so much for watching and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications as I will be posting a new video every Friday here on YouTube. See you soon! Bye!